How good intentions secretly backfire. The Cobra Effect explained. Have you ever tried to fix a problem only to make it worse? Have you ever acted with the best of intentions only to see your efforts spiral into unintended consequences? If you've ever wondered why the world feels like a place where solutions often create more chaos than clarity, then you're not alone. And the truth might be more philosophical and more unsettling than you think. Because beneath the surface of our decisions, our policies, our everyday actions lies a subtle but dangerous force, the Cobra Effect. Let's start with the story. In colonial India, British officials had a problem. There were too many cobras in Delhi. It was a public health crisis, a fear-inducing threat, and so the government came up with a seemingly rational solution. They offered a reward for every dead cobra. At first, it worked. People started killing snakes and bringing them in for money. But then something strange happened. People began breeding cobras. Why? Because the system had created an incentive and people exploited it. Eventually, the government caught on and cancelled the program. But without the incentive, breeders released the now worthless snakes into the wild. The result? More cobras than before. The problem they tried to solve got worse. That, in essence, is the Cobra Effect, when a well-meaning solution actually amplifies the problem it was meant to fix. Now pause for a second and ask yourself, how many times in your own life have you seen this pattern play out? You try to help a friend by giving advice, and it backfires. You try to protect someone from pain, and you end up enabling their weakness. You try to control a situation, and it becomes more chaotic. But on a personal, societal, and even global level, we are surrounded by Cobra Effects, feedback loops of failure born from good intentions and short-sighted thinking. But why does this happen? Why do we intelligent, caring beings keep falling into this trap? The answer lies in a flaw not of the heart, but of the mind. Good intentions are emotional. They come from empathy, compassion, fear, or hope. But the world operates on systems, incentives, and consequences, and those are logical. When we act based on how we feel without understanding how the system works, we blind ourselves to the unintended consequences. But we confuse morality with mechanics. We assume that because our heart is in the right place, the outcome will follow. But reality doesn't bend to our emotions. It responds to structure.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
This is where philosophy becomes crucial. Because the Cobra Effect isn't just a story about snakes or bad policy, it's a mirror showing us the limits of our wisdom. It asks us to question the very nature of action. Is it enough to mean well, or must we also think well? Can an action still be good if it leads to harm? And perhaps most importantly, what is the responsibility of the thinker in a world driven by feeling? Let's look at a modern example. Consider social media. Built with the intention of connecting people, giving everyone a voice, empowering the individual, it has, in many ways, done the opposite. It's fragmented attention spans, fueled outrage culture, and created echo chambers where ideas go to die. Why? Because the system incentivizes engagement, not truth. It rewards dopamine, not wisdom. And yet, the people who built these platforms weren't villains, they were visionaries. But vision without foresight is just fire without a map. The Cobra Effect doesn't care about your intentions. It only responds to your design. And this is where things get personal. Because it's easy to point fingers at governments or tech giants. But what about us? What about the small decisions we make every day in relationships, at work, in our own minds that are shaped by the same flawed logic? We try to avoid pain by numbing ourselves with distraction. We try to help others by solving their problems instead of strengthening their capacity. We try to control outcomes without understanding the systems we're interfering with. And then we wonder why things don't work. Why we feel more exhausted, more disconnected, more helpless, even though we're trying so hard to do the right thing. What if the real danger isn't evil, but unexamined good? What if the world is not broken by malice, but by the ripple effects of unreflected kindness? That's a terrifying thought, but also a liberating one. Because it means the solution isn't just to try harder. It's to think deeper, to slow down, or to ask better questions before we act, to understand the system before we offer the solution. So let me ask you and really sit with this. When was the last time your good intentions made things worse? And what did you learn? Did you blame the world, or did you examine your own thinking? Did you withdraw from responsibility, or did you evolve your approach? This is the beginning of our journey. The Cobra Effect is not just a cautionary tale. It's a philosophical invitation to rethink how we engage with reality, because wisdom is not about having all the answers. It's about knowing which questions to ask before you act. The wisdom of complexity, why simple solutions fail in a complicated world. If the Cobra Effect teaches us anything, it's that the world we live in is not a machine you can fix with a single wrench. It's more like a living ecosystem, dynamic, unpredictable, and deeply interconnected. And yet, time and again, we approach complex problems with simple solutions. We treat symptoms instead of root causes. We apply linear thinking to non-linear systems. We try to impose order on what is inherently chaotic, and when it doesn't work, we're shocked. But complexity doesn't care about our desire for simplicity. It follows its own rules, and to live wisely in a complicated world, we must unlearn the dangerous comfort of quick fixes. You see, our brains crave simplicity. We are wired to reduce, to categorize, to simplify. But it helps us survive. It helps us make fast decisions. But this evolutionary strength is also a cognitive trap. Because when we apply that same reductionist thinking to problems like poverty, mental health, climate change, education, or even personal relationships, we often end up making things worse. Why? Why? Because each of those problems exists within a web of feedback loops, invisible incentives, historical baggage, and human emotion. You can't pull one thread without tugging on the entire fabric. Let's take an example. Imagine a city where traffic congestion is a major issue. The local government decides to build more roads. Seems logical, right? More space, less traffic. But what happens? More roads lead to more cars. More cars lead to more congestion. The solution creates the very problem it was meant to solve. This is known as induced demand, and it's a perfect example of how simple solutions fail when they don't account for systemic behavior. The same thing happens in healthcare when we treat symptoms with pills without addressing lifestyle or environmental causes, or in education when we increase standardized testing to improve learning, only to kill curiosity and creativity in the process. These are all Cobra effects in disguise, well-meaning interventions that ignore the wisdom of complexity. But what exactly is this wisdom of complexity? It's the art of seeing the whole instead of just the parts. It's understanding that every action exists within a network of relationships, that everything affects everything else. It's the humility to admit you don't control the system, you participate in it. And that participation requires not dominance, but dialogue, not command, but comprehension. In practical terms, this means we need to slow down our thinking, not our intelligence, but our tempo. We need to pause before we act, to ask, what are the second-order effects? What happens after this happens? Who benefits? Who might suffer? What incentives am I creating? These questions don't come naturally, they require training. Just like physical strength is built through resistance, intellectual wisdom is built through complexity, through resisting the urge to simplify what must remain nuanced. And yet, complexity doesn't mean paralysis. It doesn't mean we never act. It means we act differently. We act with more awareness, more curiosity, more openness to feedback. We build systems that can learn, adapt, evolve rather than systems that break the moment reality doesn't match the blueprint. This is true in politics, in business, in family, in personal growth. Complexity demands a new kind of intelligence, not just IQ, but systems intelligence. The ability to perceive patterns, anticipate feedback loops, and work with the system instead of against it. So why don't more people think this way? Because complexity is uncomfortable. It threatens our sense of control. It delays gratification. It forces us to live with uncertainty, ambiguity, and contradiction, things we are taught to avoid at all costs. But here's the paradox. The more we reject complexity, the more chaotic our lives become. The more we embrace it, the more we can dance with life's uncertainties instead of being crushed by them. Wisdom, then, is not about finding the right answer, it's about asking the right question, at the right time, in the right context. It's about embracing the richness of reality without trying to force it into a box. So let me ask you, where are you using a simple solution to solve a complex problem? In your relationships? Your work? Your habits? What would it look like to step back, zoom out, and see the system instead of just the surface? Because once you begin to see complexity not as a threat, but as a teacher, you unlock a new level of awareness, the kind that doesn't just avoid Cobra effects, but anticipates them. You begin to live not as a fixer of problems, but as a steward of systems. And that shift might be the most powerful transformation of all. The ethics of intent, why meaning well, is never enough. We live in a culture that glorifies good intentions. At least they meant well, we say, as if moral credit should be given for emotional sincerity alone. But if we've learned anything from the Cobra effect and the wisdom of complexity, it's this: intention without awareness is not virtue, it's a liability. Meaning well is not the same as doing well. And the distance between what we want to happen and what actually happens is often filled with unseen consequences, unexamined motives, and ethical blind spots. So the question we must ask is not just what do I intend, but what does my intention unleash? Think about the last time someone hurt you while claiming to help. Maybe they gave you advice you didn't ask for. Maybe they tried to fix you when all you needed was understanding. Maybe they imposed their values on your life because they believed their way was better. Were their intentions good? Possibly. But did the outcome honor your dignity, your reality, your agency? That's the deeper question. Because ethics isn't about what exists in your heart, it's about how your actions echo in someone else's world. And in a world as complex as ours, even love can become a weapon if it lacks wisdom. Here's the crux. When we equate good intentions with moral rightness, we excuse ourselves from responsibility. We hide behind the comfort of our sincerity. We say, "I didn't mean for that to happen," as if consequences care about our emotional state. But the universe is not a courtroom for our feelings. It is a mirror for our actions. And if we want to live ethically, truly ethically, we must be willing to confront the actual impact of what we do, not just the emotional purity of why we did it. This is where philosophy becomes incredibly practical. But the ancient Stoics, for example, taught that virtue isn't a feeling, it's a discipline. To be good is not merely to wish the best for others, but to practice goodness in a way that's informed by reason, context, and humility. Buddhism teaches something similar, that compassion must be paired with skillful means, or else it becomes clumsy and potentially harmful. Even modern psychology tells us that empathy without boundaries can lead to burnout, codependency, and harm. The message is clear. Intention is only the beginning of ethics, not the end. So how do we move beyond intention? The answer lies in reflection, feedback, and accountability. We must become students of effect, not just champions of motive. We must ask harder questions. What are the unintended consequences of my help? Am I projecting my values onto others? Am I solving a problem that isn't mine to solve? Is my kindness actually a form of control? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary if we are to be truly responsible in our actions. And this applies to all areas of life. In parenting, when we try to protect our children from failure, we may rob them of resilience. In leadership, when we try to motivate others through pressure, we may crush their intrinsic creativity. In activism, when we push for justice without understanding the cultural or systemic dynamics, we may inflame division instead of healing it. Even in friendship, when we give unsolicited advice, we may undermine someone's journey of self-discovery. In all these cases, our intent may be good, but our execution reveals the depth of our awareness. This is why philosophy is not just an abstract exercise. It's a mirror we hold up to our own lives. It asks us not just to feel, but to think deeply about what our feelings produce. It challenges us to expand our definition of doing good from emotional sincerity to conscious impact. And in doing so, it transforms ethics from a passive state into an active, living practice. So let me ask you something that could change how you live. Are you willing to let go of being seen as a good person in order to become one? Are you ready to hold yourself accountable, not just for your motives, but for your effects, even when they contradict your sense of self? That's the true test of character. Not how good you feel about your actions, but how clearly you're willing to see their consequences. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't need more nice people. It needs wise people. People who understand that ethics is not a shield for ego, but a responsibility we carry into every interaction. And once we embrace that, our good intentions stop being dangerous and start becoming powerful. Beyond control, how surrendering certainty leads to real wisdom. If we've walked this far together through the dangers of good intentions, the complexity of systems, and the ethics of impact, then we arrive at a final, liberating truth. Wisdom doesn't come from knowing more, doing more, or controlling more. It comes from the humility to let go, but to surrender not in weakness, but in awareness. In a world obsessed with mastery, prediction, and control, this is a radical idea. But the most profound wisdom often comes when we stop trying to force life into our design and start listening to what life is trying to tell us. Most of the Cobra effects we've explored stem from one core misunderstanding: the belief that we can fully control outcomes, that we can engineer reality to match our desires, that if we just plan well enough or try hard enough, the world will obey. But systems don't work that way. People don't work that way. Life at every level is full of variables we cannot see, let alone manage. And the more we try to control, the more we distort. Like someone clutching sand in a closed fist, the tighter we grip, the more slips through our fingers. This doesn't mean we should stop acting. It means we must act differently, with less arrogance and more alignment, with less certainty and more curiosity, with less rigidity and more responsiveness. The ancient Taoists understood this deeply. They taught that the wise person flows like water, adapting, responding, yielding without breaking. Not because they are passive, but because they understand the nature of the stream. They don't fight the current, they learn its rhythm. That's not passivity. That's mastery without control. In modern life, we often mistake control for competence. We try to micromanage every outcome, script every moment, predict every possibility. But the deepest wisdom comes not from trying to eliminate uncertainty, it comes from learning to dance with it. Consider the most meaningful experiences in your life, the ones that shaped you. Did they come from perfect plans or from unexpected turns? Did they happen because you controlled every variable, or because something cracked you open and forced you to grow? Life is not a chessboard, it's a living conversation. And wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to listen. This surrender is not a defeat, it's a higher order of engagement. It means embracing complexity instead of simplifying it. It means holding your intentions lightly, knowing they might need to change. It means caring deeply, but not clinging tightly. It means being willing to act, and just as willing to be wrong. Because real wisdom isn't about being right, it's about being real. With yourself, with others, with the world as it actually is, not as you wish it were. In practical terms, this means shifting from control to stewardship, from domination to dialogue. Whether you're leading a team, raising a child, starting a movement, or simply trying to live with integrity, the principle is the same. Guide, don't grip. Influence, don't impose. Create space for feedback, emergence, evolution. Let the system teach you something, rather than trying to force your agenda through it. That's where the magic happens, not in control, but in connection. So here's the final question, and maybe the most important one of all. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to control it? What would happen if, instead of forcing outcomes, you focused on growing your awareness, sharpening your perception, deepening your questions? What if wisdom isn't found in the answers you chase, but in the surrender that allows you to see more clearly? Because in the end, the Cobra Effect is not just a story about unintended consequences, but it's a spiritual mirror. It shows us what happens when we act without seeing, when we try to force what must be felt, when we mistake intention for wisdom and control for clarity. But it also points to another path, one of humility, awareness, and surrender. A path where we don't just try to fix the world, but learn to listen to it. And maybe that's the deepest wisdom of all, not that we can control the future, but that we can meet it fully awake, fully aware, and deeply aligned with something greater than ourselves.